Hello and welcome to Sunny English Bite. Today, we are going to talk about something that has changed all of our lives smartphones. Do you remember what life was like before them? We will think about life then and life now. This is a topic everyone can relate to. And remember, you don't need perfect English to listen. Just relax and join our conversation.
That's right. This is a space for learning English through real, natural conversation.
Exactly. I'm Sunny, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Alec.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
So, Alex, let's start with a question for our listeners, and for you too. Can you imagine leaving your house without your phone just for one day?
Wow, that's a tough question to start with. Honestly, it feels almost impossible. My wallet, my keys, my phone, they're the three things I must have.
Right? It feels like a part of you is missing. I remember a time I forgot my phone at home and I felt so disconnected, so anxious.
Disconnected, that's a good word. But do you remember a time when that was normal? When we didn't check our phones every 5 minutes?
I do. It feels like a different world. Think about your morning routine back then. What was the first thing you did when you woke up? For me, it was just waking up. Maybe looking out the window.
Yeah, not reaching for a phone to check notifications, emails, or social media. My alarm clock was just an alarm clock. It didn't also have the entire internet inside it.
Exactly. And what about riding the subway or the bus? I used to read a book or just look at people. Now everyone is looking down at their screen.
Totally. Or listen to music on a Walkman or an MP3 player. It was a single task device. You just listened to music. You couldn't suddenly decide to watch a video or answer an email.
And before going to sleep, I used to read a physical book. Now I have to make a real effort not to look at my phone right before I close my eyes.
That's a big one. The blue light, the endless scrolling, it's not very relaxing. Some people say life was simpler before smartphones. Do you agree with that, Sunny?
I think in many ways, yes. It felt slower, we had fewer things demanding our attention all the time. But let's talk more about that. What was really different about life before smartphones?
Well, communication is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yes, absolutely.
Back then, we used to call people on the phone, a landline phone, at their house. You couldn't just send a quick text, you had to have a real conversation.
And you had to find a payphone if you were out and needed to call someone. I remember having to borrow a coin from a stranger once because I had to call my parents to pick me up. It taught you how to ask for help. Yes, and it makes me think about phone numbers. We used to memorize them. I still remember my best friend's home phone number from when I was 10 years old. We had to keep all the important numbers in our heads or in a little paper address book.
That's a great point. How did it feel to be completely unreachable for hours? Sometimes it was stressful, but mostly it was peaceful. You were just wherever you were living in that moment.
Ugh, disposable cameras. I remember those so well. You would take 24 pictures and have no idea if they were good or bad. You couldn't check. You had to wait a week to take the camera to a store, get the photos developed, and then you'd get a pack of printed photos. Sometimes half of them were blurry.
Can you describe that feeling of waiting for a younger listeners? You'd finish the roll of 24 pictures, take it to a store, and then wait a week to see if any of them were good. It was a mix of excitement and mystery. Can you describe that feeling of waiting for a younger listeners? You'd finish the roll of 24 pictures, take it to a store, and then wait a week to see if any of them were good. It was a mix of excitement and mystery.
Oh, I remember that so well. You would call your friend's house and their mom or dad might answer. You had to be polite and ask, "Hello, may I please speak to Sarah?"
Right, and making plans was so different. We used to make plans in advance, and we had to stick to them.
In advance. You couldn't send a text saying, "Hey, I'm running 10 minutes late." If you said you would meet at the cinema at 7 p.m., you had to be there at 7 p.m.
Exactly. There was no changing plans last minute. People relied on you to be where you said you would be. It required more commitment.
There was a lot of trust involved. You had to trust that the other person would remember, that they would be on time. It feels like we were more patient back then because we had no other choice.
That's a great point. And do you remember waiting for a phone call at home? If you were expecting someone to call, you had to stay home to receive it.
Of course, and if you missed the call, you missed it. There was no voicemail on every device. Maybe an answering machine if you were lucky. It made each call feel more important.
That reminds me of renting movies from a video store. You'd go to the store, walk around for half an hour, and choose one or two movies for the weekend. And that was it. You couldn't change your mind and stream something else. Your Friday night entertainment was decided right there in the store.
It really did. Okay, what about finding information? That has changed so much.
Oh, yeah. I remember using paper maps, big foldable paper maps when driving to a new place.
Yes, I used to have so many maps in my car. And if you got lost, what did you do? You had to stop and ask a stranger for directions.
Asking strangers. It forced you to interact with people. And sometimes those small interactions were really nice. People were usually very happy to help.
They were. And for school or work, if you needed to know something, you couldn't just Google it. You had to go to the library or look in an encyclopedia at home. I remember having to write a report about ancient Egypt in middle school. I spent hours at the library surrounded by big, heavy books and encyclopedias looking for information and pictures. It took a long time, but I remember the feeling of discovery, of finding a cool fact on a page. It was a very physical way of learning.
Right? We didn't have instant answers to every single question in our pocket. If you were having a debate with a friend about a fact, you just didn't know the answer for sure. You had to wait until you got home to a computer.
And speaking of patience, what about waiting for a letter in the mail or a postcard from a friend on vacation? That feeling of checking the mailbox every day, that anticipation is something we've lost with instant messaging.
That's so true. Life felt slower because of that. We had to be patient. Which brings me to my next point, waiting and boredom.
Yes, boredom. I almost forgot what that feels like.
Right? If you were waiting in line at the grocery store or at the doctor's office, you just waited without a phone. You would sit quietly or look around.
You would watch people, you would notice things about the world around you, or you would just be alone with your thoughts, thinking and daydreaming. That's such a good way to put it. Letting your mind wander. We don't do that as much now. I remember I used to get my best ideas for stories or drawings when I was just sitting on the bus, looking out the window, completely bored. That space allowed for creativity.
And there was a shared social experience. I remember everyone in the country watching the final episode of a famous TV show on the same night. The next day at school or work, everyone would talk about it. There were no spoilers on social media, so you all experienced the story together.
That's so true. It reminds me of disposable cameras. Do you remember those? You would take 24 pictures on a vacation, but you had no idea if they were good or bad. You couldn't see them. You had to take the camera to a store and wait a week to get your photos developed.
Oh, disposable cameras. Can you describe that feeling of waiting for our younger listeners? You'd finish the roll of 24 pictures, take it to a store, and then wait a week to see if any of them were good. It was a mix of excitement and mystery.
That's so true. It reminds me of disposable cameras. Do you remember those? You would take 24 pictures on a vacation, but you had no idea if they were good or bad. You couldn't see them. You had to take the camera to a store and wait a week to get your photos developed.
That reminds me of renting movies from a video store. You'd go to the store, walk around for half an hour, and choose one or two movies for the weekend, and that was it. You couldn't change your mind and stream something else. Your Friday night entertainment was decided right there in the store.
Exactly. We don't have those empty moments as much anymore. Any free second can be filled by looking at our phone. Life definitely felt slower then.
It did. So it sounds like there were a lot of good things about that slower life. Let's talk more about that. What was the good side of life before smartphones?
For me, a big one was feeling less busy. My brain wasn't constantly processing new information from emails, messages, and news alerts. It felt more peaceful.
Peaceful. I agree. You could be more present in the moment. When you were with your friends, you were really with them. You weren't also half texting someone else.
That is so important. Being less distracted. The conversations felt deeper because everyone was focused. We had more real face-to-face conversations.
Yeah, those real connections. And you also had more time alone with just your thoughts. That quiet time is important for creativity and for just understanding yourself.
I completely agree. I remember having long coffee dates with my best friend. We would talk for hours with no phones on the table. If a phone rang in a cafe, it was almost surprising. Now it's the opposite. It's surprising when a phone doesn't interrupt a conversation. Those conversations created such strong bonds. It is. It felt more relaxed. I also feel that experiences were more memorable.
More memorable? What do you mean by that?
Well, when we went on vacation or to a concert, we weren't busy taking hundreds of photos and videos to post online. We were just there, experiencing it with our own eyes. I think that helps me remember things better, feel them more deeply.
That makes sense. You were living the experience, not documenting it. I can see how that would feel more real.
Exactly. I was at a concert recently and I saw a sea of phones filming the show. People were watching the concert through their tiny screens. Back then, we just watched the show. We listened, we danced, we felt the music. I think I remember the feeling of those older concerts more clearly. So, feeling less distracted, more present, peaceful, relaxed, having real connections, those are some really positive things.
That makes me think about hobbies. Before the internet was in our pocket, how did we even learn new things? If you wanted to learn guitar, you had to get a book from the library or find a teacher.
That's a fantastic point, Alex. It required a lot of dedication. You couldn't just watch a 5-minute tutorial, you had to be really committed to a hobby to pursue it. It was a bigger investment of time and sometimes money.
It's true, but to be fair, we should have a balanced view. We shouldn't criticize smartphones too much. They have a good side too, right?
Of course, on the other hand, smartphones make life more convenient in so many ways.
Definitely. The most obvious one is easy communication anytime, anywhere. I can talk to my family who live in another country so easily. That's a huge benefit.
A huge benefit. And the fast access to information. If I have a question about anything, health, cooking, directions, I have the answer in seconds. It helps us save time.
It really does. And think about all the helpful tools we have on our phone.
Like what?
Well, maps for one. I don't miss those giant paper maps at all. GPS is amazing.
Okay, you have a point there. I love Google Maps.
And translation apps. If you're traveling in a foreign country, they're incredibly helpful. Or the Notes app for remembering ideas. And the camera. The camera in my pocket is better than most cameras from 20 years ago.
That's a big one for me. I was traveling in Japan a few years ago and I got completely lost in the Tokyo subway station. It was overwhelming, but I used a translation app to ask a station agent for help, and I used the map on my phone to find my hotel. It turned a scary situation into a manageable one. I was so grateful for that little device in my pocket.
That's true. The camera is fantastic. And for our listeners, smartphones are a great tool for learning English. You can listen to podcasts like this one, use dictionary apps, watch videos. Exactly. So they help us connect, learn, and be more efficient. They're powerful tools.
So, that brings us to the big question. With all the good and the bad, do we really miss life before smartphones?
That is the big question. And I've been thinking about this. Maybe we don't miss the past itself. I don't miss being lost without a map, for example.
Me neither. Or not being able to contact someone in an emergency.
Right. So it's not that we hate smartphones, but maybe what we miss is that slower feeling. The feeling of being less connected and less distracted.
I think you're right. Maybe we miss the boredom, the quiet moments. Maybe we miss just being present.
Though the problem might be how we use smartphones, not the smartphones themselves. They're just tools after all.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. If we use smartphones wisely, maybe we can have the best of both worlds. We can have the convenience and the connection, but also create those quiet, offline moments for ourselves.
That's the goal, isn't it? It's a challenge for all of us. It requires self-control.
Exactly. It's about finding a healthy balance. For example, my family and I have a phone-free dinner rule. No phones at the table. It's a small thing, but it helps us connect and really talk to each other. It really is. So, we want to give our listeners some questions to think about. This is a great chance for you to practice your English by thinking or even speaking your answers out loud.
Okay, I'll go first. The first question is, what do you miss most about life before smartphone? Think about it for a moment. What's the one thing that comes to mind?
That's a great question. And here's the second one. How much time do you spend on your phone every day? Most phones have a feature that tells you this. The answer might surprise you.
It can be a little shocking. And the last question, could you live without your smartphone for one day? Just 24 hours. How would you feel? What would you do?
We would love to hear your answers. You can leave a comment below this podcast and share your thoughts.
We read all the comments, and it's a great way to practice your writing.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our conversation today. We talked about what life was like before smartphones, the good and the bad, and we thought about what we really missed.
That's right. Remember, it's okay if you didn't understand everything. The most important thing is to listen and get used to the sounds of natural English. You can always listen again.
Exactly. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel, Sunny English Bite.
And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. We'll be talking about different food cultures around the world.
Ooh, that will be a delicious topic. Thank you so much for listening today.
Yes, thank you everyone. Keep practicing and we'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.